Hello, I am Dapper Dan Gavoston, and I own every issue of Amazing Spider-Man, including the annuals, which definitely count.
And I'm Mischievous Mark Chinacchio, and I own every issue of Amazing Spider-Man, but the annuals don't count. Do we count the beyond, like point beyond issues, Dan? I probably asked this a few weeks ago, but I don't
I
know.
do, but I also count the Black Cat and Mary Jane issues, which I think are key parts of the story. And that's right, because we're going to be talking about some of those today. So, welcome everybody to the Amazing Spider Talk, the show where two fans and collectors uncover the strange, fun, and fascinating history of the Spider Man, Black Cat, Mary Jane, on and on and on and on comic universe. Thanks for joining us for this review episode of the Amazing Spider Talk.
If you want to swing along with us on our journey through Spidey's past, present, and future, subscribe to Amazing Spider Talk on your favorite podcast app. Every other week, we put out a mainline episode of our flagship show, and sprinkled in between, we review new comics as well as interview some of the greatest Spider-Man creators of yesterday and today. This is the perfect time to start listening.
Yeah, but what are we going to be talking
Well,
about
Dan,
today, Mark?
Today on the show, you and I are going to be discussing Amazing Spider-Man Volume 5, number 87, which is Beyond Chapter 13. This issue was written by Jed MacKay, with art from Carlos Gomez, colors from Bryan Balenza, a cover by Arthur Adams and Alejandro Sanchez Rodriguez, and of course, letters by VC's Joe Caramagna. This issue was first released on January 26, 2021.
And
Dan, why don't you tell us a little bit about what happened in this
yeah,
one,
sure.
Dan?
Let's keep this really simple, Mark, because I don't think there's a lot to say here, and honestly, I think that's a really good thing. You know, in this issue, Black Cat recruits Captain America to help her train Peter Parker back into fighting form. That training takes on several different forms, including swinging around the city, stopping the Black Cat herself from robbing a jewelry store, and a fight between Spidey and Captain America. All the while, Black Cat is incredibly sexy, Captain America spouts inspiring words of wisdom, and Peter redons his paper bag mask and classic animal crop top. All in all, these are some fun Spider-Man antics that see Peter slowly brushing off the cobwebs and getting back into his role as Spider-Man. Meanwhile, Ben is being tested on his memory at Beyond and is found both lacking in Spidey memories and endlessly moldable, particularly after we realize he'd forgotten Uncle Ben's famous mantra. And Maxine has confronted Dr. Kafka for her treasonous behavior and threatens her with a bottle of the sins of Norman Osborn. And that's where we leave off on a nice little cliffhanger with Mary Jane and Janine coming into contact with each other after the events of Black Cat and Mary Jane #1. Which is to say, Mark, we're going to talk briefly about the great standalone Black Cat and Mary Jane #1 comic. You know, we've been getting this book every single week. It's been nonstop Spider-Man comics. And so I don't think we have the bandwidth to cover the whole issue of Black Cat, Mary Jane, but there's no way we could not talk about that comic.
Absolutely. I mean, we've been getting it every week. We got 2 issues last week. I mean, no rest for the weary if you're a Spider-Man fan right now. We're gonna get to 900 before you know it.
While they also pump the brakes. I mean, a lot of these .BEY issues could have been Amazing Spider-Man issues. So, like, they're also in no hurry to get there, which means the way I take it is they wanted to, like, line it up as the end of whatever the first JR arc is so he can end that arc with a bang. And if the preview pages are anything to go by, that might actually be literal. But let's talk about Amazing Spider-Man Volume 5, number 87. This is a kind of story. You know, the last issue was such a cliffhanger and really kicked things into high gear for the Beyond story. I think both of us coming into this were a little weary about, you know, as much as we loved all the Peter stories in this Beyond run, I at least was worried that, you know, moving back to Peter would kind of release the gas a bit on Ben's storyline, which had finally gotten moving. And I got to say, Mark, I was like happy to be proven wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like this was the perfect way to focus on Peter, but like, at the same time, we did get some Ben woven in an effective way to keep that story trucking along. I mean, like, look, this is how you do comics in this era, especially like with these multiple creative teams and switching off and weekly storytelling. Like this was perfect to me. Well, I don't want to say I shouldn't set it up by saying it's perfect because as much as I liked it, I don't have a perfect score for it. But like this is really effective storytelling in terms of how this was put together here. I think this was really well done by Jed MacKay and Carlos Gomez. I mean, just in terms of tone and focus and keeping the plot moving, like this thing can stand alone. Um, and you can kind of just come in and check in on it and know everything that's going on without really having to be too steeped in the mythology of everything that's been happening during Beyond. But at the same token, it moved the Beyond story another step forward in a really effective way. So like, kudos to the creative team on this and to Marvel for getting this issue out the way they did. I really
I
enjoyed
just
it.
wish Marvel got this issue out with the right people credited for it. If you look on that title page, it says Zeb Wells wrote this. And to Zeb's credit, he spent like the whole past week on Twitter correcting people that he did not write this story for all the kudos that it was getting. So I both feel bad
Right.
for him and Jed for having to like deal with the editorial mix up there. Which Nick Lowe also addressed, that it was an oversight, and that's unfortunate because on a story this good, not everybody's going to do the job to check who it was behind the story. But back
Right.
to your point, like to me, this is kind of the platonic ideal of Spider-Man stories, just kind of without a villain. You'd normally get a villain in something like this, but there's so many great Spider-Man stories over the years without a villain, even if that villain is like leukemia or whatever. But I just love a story like this that can stand on its own, like you said, and be a part of the ongoing plot. And I feel like oftentimes plot really takes over, and this was just like really pure character, and that's what I loved about it. And I think oftentimes these books are on fast forward to get to the next big splashy idea. And what I've liked about this book, and I like about Jed MacKay's various runs on things at Marvel, especially his Black Hat, is how like much he's dialed into character. And I couldn't ask for a better showcase for what Jed MacKay does well than this comic. Well, and the Black Cat and Mary Jane comic that came out the same day. I mean, if you're Jed MacKay, you had like a really good week.
Absolutely. I mean, it's funny, like I feel like Jed MacKay wasn't necessarily a front runner at any point to take over as the full-time writer of this book. I don't know if Zeb Wells was either, frankly, until he was announced. But like, and this is to take nothing away from Zeb Wells because I look forward to what he's going to do. But a book like this, or the two books, frankly, like this, make me really want to read more Jed MacKay in this universe right now. I know, well, Black Cat, the series seems to kind of come and go again. I mean, I hope that they kick that book back up again. I know he's been doing Death of Doctor Strange. I have not read that. I'll catch up on that on Unlimited. But like, yeah, I mean, this guy, he writes a good Peter Parker, and I think has a good balance of how to bring in your main characters, but also your supporting cast. I mean, like this was it pinballed around, but like not in a frenetic way. Like I just felt like I was just locked in on this comic and the way the story unfurled page to page. There was never a moment where I was felt like I was like losing the thread a little bit here, and that's not the norm these days in Spider-Man. That's not to disrespect anyone who's done this, but like, this was as good of a single issue of Spider-Man that we've gotten in a really long time, in my opinion.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And it's funny you mentioned about him like getting a run on this title, because like if you'd asked me before the Jet announcement, barring like the Donny Cates and the other superstars, to me Jed was a real top of my list, even over Zeb Wells for taking on this book. I could see him in the vein of like a Nick Spencer, where Nick Spencer got that Superior Foes book and proved that he could do something in the world of Spider-Man. I think Jed MacKay's Black Cat is no less definitive. I think that has been one of the most joyous books Marvel's put out recently. And, you know, to the credit, like, you know, you can see that Black Cat in this issue. You know, I feel like he really brought over his version of Black Cat into this comic and the Black Cat and Mary Jane comic. And, you know, I don't think he completely reinvented the character, but I think he's really given her a voice that makes her stand apart. And yes, she's still sexy and that's her thing, but there's so much more nuance to the character as presented by him. And there's just a joy for writing her. Like I think he has the definitive take on the character, if you ask me. Like it like just seems like the most fully fleshed out version of Black Cat, and having her appear in 2 comics this week, you know, she was a major bonus for those comics. Yeah. And his Mary Jane, frankly, I really enjoyed reading his Mary Jane in both of these issues.
Right. And then the fact that you had Felicia teaming up with Captain America of all people, and it worked. It never, like, you know, there was a part of me when I saw this as the concept thinking, oh, there's no, like, this is going to be really contrite, and it wasn't. Like, you know, like you said in your plot summary, Dan. I mean, you had Felicia being Felicia, and you had Cap doing his stoic inspirational thing, but like they were kind of a good balance in terms of getting Peter back in, you know, into the groove of things. So I really appreciated that.
I also wanted to shout out Carlos Gomez, you know, who we've gotten, you know, off and on in this title, but like this guy I feel like deserves an award for like most like adaptable. Like he really has been changing his style up even just through the past year and a half that we've seen him been doing Spidey comics and books at Marvel. I didn't even recognize his style in this comic, you know, from the previous appearances of him. And that's not to say like he was a slouch before, but like I thought this book was really attractive looking. I know that there's some like memes going around about like just how sexily drawn Black Cat is, and I do want to talk about that later on. But I thought this was a really fun book. Your characters were very distinct from each other. You know, Cap with his big kind of like blocky linebacker look, you know, and Peter with this kind of nerdy, you know, college doofus look. You know, that all really worked for me. And I think it was really a part of him to make something so appealing, even if I think that his work for Spider-Man could use a little more weirdness. Like anytime Spider-Man looks like a mass market appealing book, it's a little bit off to me. I like it to look a little strange, but I mean, I think his style is quite attractive and easy to read.
Why don't we talk a little bit about the humor of this book? Because I think there was, I mean, especially on the sight gag front, I mean, there was a bunch of stuff here that, you know, they were kind of like sight chuckles, but like they worked. Like, you know, you had mentioned it obviously early on, that we saw the return of the animal midriff or crop top, whatever you want to call it, shirt from the is it JR or is that or had that? No, you're right. It's JR and Stern at that point. I'm like trying to remember, was that DeFalco? But no, you're right. It's JR and Stern. We had him. I guess Peter was also borrowing the "I'm Not Daredevil" shirt from Matt Murdock. I mean, you know, and of course the return of Bagman. You know, like the paper bag Spider-Man head. I mean, like, you know, I mean, these are not like deep level jokes, but like to me, this was the perfect mix of being reverential in your humor, but also not like making fun of these moments from the past. Like, I mean, you know, even like the crop top, you know, like they could have just like, you know, why the hell would you ever wear that? You know, like, but it wasn't like that. Like, I mean, like these were clearly done for the true ones or the real ones, if you will. But like at the same time, like they didn't, like, I feel, insult us for liking those comics and laughing at those jokes.
I
back
just
then,
like love that in my headcanon now, Peter's had the animal crop top just like hanging in his closet all these years, and just is like, you know, when you slide your hangers, you know, maybe not today. I'll wear that eventually at some point. And this was it. This was this was the moment. Like we finally got back to the animal crop top from the 80s. I loved all that, and I love the joke where like he's like trying to get Cap on his side, and Cap's like, well, why can't she just give you back the mask? And he's like, yeah, that's what I've been saying. And just the idea that
Yeah.
she's kind of being like kind of vindictive or whatever with him with this thing is so funny. Just throwaway gags like that are very Spider-Man to me. So I enjoyed this a lot. It got a
Yeah.
lot of chuckles out of me.
Yeah, I mean, there's a part of me that's like, okay, I mean, like, is the circumstance here a little contrived in that, like, the way that, specifically with the baghead, like the way they brought the baghead back was kind of like, well, that's because we can't give you the mask, and it's like, okay, so like, you're telling me the paper bag is the only thing he can wear. I mean, but you know what? Like I said,
Who
it was a
cares?
callback to a great joke at the time. I mean, yeah, and like if that's how they're gonna bring back Baghead, then let's bring back Baghead. I mean, like
Yeah,
long
right.
live
I mean, like
Baghead.
Baghead on its very essence is insane. Like Mister Fantastic couldn't whip up something
Yeah.
more than a paper bag for him to wear. The whole thing is an insult against Peter from the very beginning. So shifting over away from Peter, this comic does check in on Beyond, and I got to say I was very grateful for that. Normally something like this would feel like an interruption into the flow, but I felt like it was actually also well paced, which is a hard thing to do, right? We've gotten a
Right.
lot of writers on this title that really have struggled with bouncing between scenes and tying it all together in a way that, like, the stories feel like they climax, at the same time, so to speak. I actually thought that these check-ins were meaningful. Yes, they definitely like turned down the temperature on the Ben story a bit, but like they also have taken us in interesting directions. We've got Maxine, who I think is finally coming across as scary when she's threatening Kafka, especially where she's like, "You're just a
Yes.
clone. Like, what rights do you have?" And it's like, okay, that's really messed up. But also, like, if she's willing to do that to Kafka, what is she willing to do to Ben? So I actually thought that she finally had some
Right.
teeth here.
Yeah, she went beyond just like the I'm gonna send you a threatening email as retribution for your poor behavior. And then we got a I guess an unexpected callback to the Nick Spencer run with Maxine here.
Yeah,
Do you want to
so I
talk a
mean,
little bit
when
about that,
we
Dan?
were talking about this in the Miles Morales issue a few issues back, I think it was issue 81. Um, and at the end of the
Hmm.
issue, Maxine brought this canister out. And at the time, I think we all thought it was the rhizome thing, that like thing that they'd stopped earlier in the issue, this like machine suit the assessor made. And we thought, oh, okay, they just took like the suit from that issue, and now they're going to deploy that later. But here, it's like very clearly not that, and it's actually the sins of Norman Osborn from the last remains or arc, right, where Norman is cleansed of his sins. So we know we have the Goblin Queen coming up, so we have to imagine that that is in some way related to how that
Yes.
character will be created. But I don't know. I mean, as eager as I am to get past the Nick Spencer stuff, I'm also like, okay, cool. This isn't happening in a vacuum. Nobody's forgetting that stuff, and maybe we'll actually get a follow up on that engagement ring at some point down the line.
As long as we don't get a follow up on like another lost Stacy twin dressed
Yeah,
up as
no, I
Kindred, then
never
I'm
want to
okay
see
with it.
Kindred again. But my understanding is they
Okay.
both died at the end of that story, and so did my interest in that character. What about what's going on with Ben?
Yeah, so Ben, he's as you mentioned in the plot summary. I mean, they're testing his memory. They're showing him visuals of different enemies, and he's kind of running through it. But what we're finding is his Spider-Man memories have gone kaput, including like his Uncle Ben moments and lessons. And it's interesting. Like when this all started and when I should say before this all started, actually, like I in we can go to the podcast tape as proof. I was kind of this way in that about like, oh, do we need another like Ben focused thing in 2000 21, 22 at this point. And it's not even that they've done anything that revolutionary with the characters so far. But we kind of talked a little bit about this in our last episode, like this idea of like a blank slate Ben, and what does this mean? And I don't know, like it leaves me a little concerned based on this issue, because yes, I think like if we can make Ben his own person, and kind of maybe separate him more from Peter, and even like his characterization from the 90s, I'm all for it. But like I don't know, like I'm starting to get like kind of flashbacks to what we saw during like the clone conspiracy, in terms of like, are we just gonna use this blank slate and this lack of responsibility and Uncle Ben's lessons as a means to just totally throw Ben to the dark side and make him a caricature of himself? So I don't know. I mean, like, do you think I'm overreading this a little bit, or do you share in those
I
concerns?
share in those concerns if ultimately that's the direction they go in. Like, I don't want to read another Scarlet Spider or Ben Reilly Scarlet Spider comic about like the all the power, none of the responsibility. I feel like that is the go-to cliche take on how to write a Spider-Man book that's not starring Peter Parker. Like, I'm okay with reading a Spider-Man book with another version of Peter Parker with some different baggage associated with it. But I'm waiting to see what they do with it. I could very well see like they're clearly going to have these two guys go up against each other, and I could see Peter instilling that lesson in him. We got that tease in Timeless #1 of Ben Reilly on the West Coast in LA. And I'm curious to see what that is. I imagine it's the series we're ultimately going to get. I also reread that issue, and there's a red-haired female in a Spider-Man costume. It looks like Mary Jane in a Spider-Man costume. I don't know what that is either. So like, I think we're ultimately going to get Ben leaving New York and going west. If it's the version of him we've gotten before, where it's like an edgy character, I don't really know how cool on that. Like how excited I would be about that. But like, say for example, if we got JMD to write it, like he's doing the flashback 5-issue Ben Reilly series, and they reboot that and give him his own Ben Reilly series on the West Coast, I'd be 100% down for that. So right now, yes, I feel your fears. I don't know that I'm like really dreading it, because I don't quite know if we're going to go there. But if they do go that way, yes, I am worried.
It's premature. It's premature to I think to conclude that's where they're going. But it's I just want to kind of raise the flag now, in case they do inevitably go in that direction, because it's just like, for me, it's like, okay, why bring this character back to go down that road again? I guess what I'm saying is, like, I really hope that they do right by they brought the character back to do right by him ultimately. And by right doesn't necessarily mean good, evil, or in between. It's just, like to give him an interesting, unique arc to this all. I mean, like, and you're right. I mean, JMD, I think would certainly be an ideal person in my mind to do that. I mean, like, Lost Years is not just a great Ben Reilly story; it's a great Spider-Man story.
We put it on our Essentials episode.
Yeah. I mean, like anyone should just go back and read that if they want to feel like get like a definitive characterization of Ben Reilly, in my opinion. So, but anyway, do you want to talk a little bit about
Tell
the
me
Slack,
a little bit
Dan?
about the Slack, Mark.
Well, hundreds of listeners like you, Dan, hang out in our community of Spider-Man fans on Slack. The amazing Spider Slack community is absolutely free to join, and you can jump into active conversations with awesome people about collecting, conventions, movies, new comics, old comics,
Mark is right.
and more.
I do hang out in the Slack all the time. This week we've been all over the place, but what's been fun is, some of us are rereading Ultimate Spider-Man for the first time, and it's just become kind of a gush fest on how much we all love Ultimate Spider-Man and that interpretation, and how it kind of, rejiggered things. And Mark, everybody's saying they're so excited for us to eventually cover that series on the show. And I just want to pump the brakes a little bit. But yes, we will get there at some point. but that will be fun to talk about Ultimate Spider-Man. But if you can't wait for then, why not come onto the Slack and talk to us about your love of Ultimate Spider-Man there. You can just follow the link in the description and be sure to say hi. And once you're there, you can tell us what you thought about this episode you're listening to right now. I love hearing from fans in real time. So come on and join our Slack.
Yeah, it's funny. We're in 1985 more or less, Dan, in terms of where we are in our episodic show, and they're talking about something that started in the year 2000. I guess my question is, does a love affair last until the Spider-Man Wolverine Freaky Friday two-parter, Dan, or has the Slack not gotten to that one yet? I actually
well,
like
Mark,
that
let me
but
surprise
I know
you with
many
something
do
that's
not.
actually going to make the transition back to this issue, because I do have a way of connecting these. Is that if you don't remember, those issues
Okay.
open with Bendis and a member of editorial like fighting about the quality of the issues, and Bendis saying, "Don't blame me. This wasn't my idea." Do you remember whose idea it was to do a Freaky Friday story in those issues?
Um, I do not. Why?
It's Nick
Who is
Lowe.
behind it, Dan? Oh boy, here we go.
Current Spider-Man editor. So moving on, speaking of editing, there's a bunch of jokes in both this issue and the Black Cat Black Cat Mary Jane issue, that like lean heavily into like the sexuality of Peter's world and these characters, Mary Jane, Black Cat, not to mention how Carlos Gomez draws Felicia throughout issue 87. And, I wanted to bring this up because, like, okay, we get the hilarious line where Black Cat calls Mary Jane out about her dump truck ass. Mark is drinking water while I'm reading that. I was waiting for a spit take.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I knew it was coming though.
I wanted to bring this up for a number of reasons. One, I think like we've gotten over the years, like kind of like the implied sexuality in these books. I mean, there's like the Mary Jane, do you take 1 or 2 lumps of sugar in your tea? Or the like, I've got like an idea of something I can do with my mouth that'll make you happy. Like there's been a lot of like really weird things over the years that like go right up to the line and don't like, I would say are almost like across the line in what they imply rather than what they show. But JMS had some tasteful stuff. I'm not saying that this is like, at this point, complaining about Felicia being a sexualized character is like worthless, because that's like 90% of like how she's been depicted, and that has escalated over the years. And I dare say this is perhaps one of the most sexualized depictions of her, short of her bathing in milk while cats drink the milk out of the tub and her breasts float in the milk. But I don't know, like to me, dump truck ass kind of caught me off guard. And like some of the other like implications in this book as like moving it maybe out of the realm of like PG-13. And I'm in no way a like guy who's keen on censorship, but I also think about like Spider-Man is like the book you buy for everybody and young people. And is this an indication that like, look, these books really aren't for kids anymore?
It's so hard to say, Dan. I mean, like, because I think like the scale is just being moved all over the place, and not that these are necessarily quote unquote kid appropriate media either. But like, I think of something like Archer or Rick and Morty or something, and it's just like, these are shows that I think like my son will quote Rick and Morty stuff, and I'm just like, oh man, like my 10-year-old, I'm just like, so it's just so hard to say. I mean, like, like there's a part of me that's like, I totally hear you, and as a parent, like, not again, I'm not looking for censorship, but like, do you want to, should something like a Spider-Man comic be an area where kids are going to find something like that potentially? But then it's like, they're finding it everywhere anyway. So like, what difference does it make anymore? I mean, that kind of nihilistic like attitude about it. So, um, and I'm trying to remember who it was. Was it Guggenheim? Someone, they were either on our show or maybe it was an interview for when I was writing my book, Dan. I can't, it all blurs together, but like, the question of like Felicia, especially during Brand New Day, when, I mean, I felt like they really kind of pushed the envelope with her and Spider-Man during Brand New Day because, hey, they're single. There's no, and the person said, well, writing sexy Felicia's fun. And it's like, yeah, I mean, I get it. If you're one of the creators here, and it's just fun to put her out there like this, and put her and Mary Jane together, and you can really have fun with it in terms of like Peter's perspective. But I kind of agree with you, Dan. I just feel like like, not that I want to be a prude about it, but we have these books, and they're supposed to be like all ages appropriate. Like, is this necessarily the kind of jokes we need to be going to? I don't know. I mean, like, can we be a little more subtle about it? Maybe like, like that might be more challenging to do as a creator, but that way you can get your joke in, but be subtle. I don't know. I guess that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I mean,
like
I don't want to condemn anyone in regards to this. Like, I've been reading criticism because like Available Alan Scherstl reached out to me about this, and like he was like, I hope it'd be cool if you guys could bring a female critic onto the show to talk about it, because I've seen a lot of female comic critics praising these issues. And I said, like, if I knew those people, I totally would bring them on, and maybe I need to seek them out, because it is interesting to me. Like, because I know at the same time we want to move past female characters being depicted as only TNA, and there's no way you can read this book and not see that Felicia is like almost entirely just on display as TNA in this issue, and yet like, is she a liberated woman? And that's what we're praising. To me, these books always feel very uneven in terms of how women are showcased. For every Anna Maria Marconi who is like, shown off for her intellect and headstrong nature, you've got 10 that are just there because they've got their boobs and butt hanging out. And yeah.
But I think from a female empowerment, perspective, I mean, like, Felicia's driving the action here in a very independent way. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, she's and hell, like the cover of Mary Jane Black Cat, it's, do you see any damsels in distress? No, not a one, Hardy. You know what I mean? Like, it's and that's not, like, I think it's not just a catchphrase. I mean, like, the women in both of the comics that we're alluding to today, while yes, visually they're sexualized, but in terms of how they impact the action of the books, I think that it's actually very liberating and inspiring. Like, they're not just sitting there being a bait for the male villains or anything like that. So they're not a honey trap. So I don't know.
I
goes both ways,
I think about like, what would these characters look like if they were empowered visually as well? Like if a woman designed her most empowered version of herself in a cat suit, which maybe there is no version of that as I'm saying it, like, would it look like Felicia Hardy?
Right.
I don't know, but like, I get that that's part of Felicia's character. She likes to be the center of male attention. And although now she's been in Jed MacKay's run, she's come out as bisexual. But yeah, I don't know. I just, it's something I wanted to flag because like my opinion on it is always evolving, and I don't know whether I'm moving forwards or backwards at any given time. I just can kind of express my feeling about it, which is like, I announced that I'm having a child, and it's like I look forward to reading Spider-Man comics with my son, and like, obviously I don't think I would throw him right into this part of the Spider-Man journey, but like, is this the version of that character that I would want to expose him to? I don't know, and maybe he's not the audience anymore. he doesn't even exist at this point. But the eventual future version of my son, I don't know. But anyway, now I'm getting all like high and
Yeah.
mighty because maybe I'm getting this parent brain. Mark, stop me. Like, me become a parent is going to ruin this show.
All right. What? No, 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 no. But let's talk a little. Let's change gears a little bit. And I just wanted to. I mean, it's not a. This is not a huge talking point here, but kind of as a capper on Peter's story here, I wanted to talk a little bit about, that good old Peter Parker perseverance, and that is a lot of alliteration there. But like, like it's so funny. Like this the that Spider-Man spirit kind of sometimes comes in unexpected ways when it comes to the comics. We have so many great stories of him, lifting tons of steel or fighting the Juggernaut against all odds. And, sometimes when they go that route, it feels a little cliched because of the greatness that has preceded it in terms of stories about that. So, again, when we kind of started on this path here with Peter and Beyond, where it was like, well, now, since he's been out of commission for so long, he kind of has to rebuild himself. A part of me was kind of like, all right, well, like they're going to try to kind of, emptily inspire me with Peter again, and I'm not going to feel it. But, the fact of the matter is I was feeling it here. Like, like especially in that last sequence when it was like Peter against Cap, and Cap is, stop pulling your punches, and like you can't get away with that. You can't get away with that with somebody like me. And Peter is struggling, but like, at the end of the day, he's like, but I'm gonna get it back because that's what I do. Like I'm Spider-Man, and it's like, it kind of brought up that scene in No Way Home where the Spider characters all were like, it's what we do. And it's like, yeah, like I'm a sucker for like driving that home that like Peter at the end of the day, yes, it's with great power must also come great responsibility. But the fact of the matter is he is just a stubborn goat who will just is willing to do whatever it takes to be the hero, and that above all is what inspires me about the character, and I'm glad that we got to see it here. I mean, I don't know if you had any thoughts on that here, or if this was just a
No, I
Mark
agree with
specific
all of
rant.
that. What really pleased me about this arc is, you have kind of clear measurements for his improvement. Like, I love the bit about you're swinging like Eddie Brock, right? There's no
Yeah,
grace to it. And I thought that was
grace
really
or
cool.
yeah.
And, there's a very cheap version of this comic where he's just better by the end of the comic and he's like ready to get up and go fighting. But the better note was having a non-victory at the end, which is like, we'll just get up and try again in that really nice silhouette illustration. And, you said No Way Home. It reminds me of Into the Spider-Verse, the Spider-Man keeps getting up thing. That was, I'm sure, inspired in some way by either of those two movies, and or countless Spider-Man comics. But that's a Spider-Man comic to me. Is like there is no clean victory at the end, and yet it's the end of this mini arc, right? Which is him trying his hardest to get back into shape, and I love that about it too. I thought that was really nice. So, and it is almost a bit of a counter to how they've been presenting Ben Reilly, who is just kind of asserting himself as Spider-Man from the beginning of Beyond.
Right.
And I'm sure those are meant to be presented as contrasts, even though I don't necessarily agree with the depiction of Ben Reilly, but we've discussed that before. So let's talk about this Black Cat and Mary Jane issue, because it, like, we can go over it very, very briefly. First of all, did you read Jed MacKay's Black Cat?
I did. I was fortunate where, when I was sick with COVID over the holidays, I did a lot of like catch up reading on comics, and I have been pulling Black Cat, and was able to use that as an opportunity to get fully caught up on that. And it was a lot of fun, and I was looking forward to this issue even before I started reading it, because again, what Jed did with Black Cat in that series, but also because I was just curious how he would write Mary Jane. And, you obviously the Beyond arc has kind of set up these two characters that their stories would cross at some point. But I was really surprised in a good way by the execution of this because, like, I felt like it was a good Black Cat level caper, the way that Jet had been writing that in her solo series, but like the way that they wove in Mary Jane, it was, they were unlikely allies, not like reluctant allies, and I appreciated that because it could have been, they could have easily had made them reluctant allies, and I think it would have not worked for me. Does that make
Absolutely.
sense to
I
you?
enjoyed all the capers, even if I don't necessarily believe that MJ would be comfortable running down the side of a building. But the thing that like cinched this issue for me was the conversation between them at the end of the story where they kind of assess their
Mm-hmm.
roles in Peter's life. And yes, it won't pass the Bechdel
Right.
test, but it was a really great scene, akin to the one that Nick Spencer wrote when he reintroduced, Felicia back into Peter's life in his run. I thought this was a really wonderful scene that, like, seeing MJ actually be supportive of Felicia is very against character, but the way Jed wrote it was very in character, and you can see this kind of bond developing there. In terms of like MJ interacting with characters this week, her being supportive of Felicia was not more baffling to me than her knowing who Janine was. But because I don't have
Mm.
any memory that those two know who each other are. But like I thought this scene was just beautifully written. It was that a standout to you as well?
Oh, 100%. I mean, like, this idea of the good girl and the bad girl, and and again, like, similar to what I was talking about with the humor in the Amazing Spider-Man issue, like this is another example of Jed MacKay, I feel like, being reverential to the history of the characters, but also not like poking holes at it. Like, like, because it's like, I loved when MJ was like, imagine living up to a dead girl, meaning Gwen. And it's like, yeah, I mean, like, you go back to those Ramita comics, and Gwen is like this pillared ideal woman in Peter's life, and MJ is, you know, go-go dancing at the clubs and stringing Harry Osborn along. I mean, those CGC, or the drug, not CGC, the drug issues with the comic book authority. I mean, like, MJ is just like, deplorably written. Like, she's the scum of the earth in those books in terms of how she treats Harry and how she goes like right back to Peter because she thinks Gwen's out of the picture. So it's just so interesting to see, like, again, the perspectives of the two characters, and I don't feel anyone is betraying themselves in what they say in those scenes. And I just really, yeah, you're right. It's not the Bechdel test, but I feel like at the same time, these characters are very true to themselves and very authentic and very sincere, and I don't know how you walk away from this comic not loving either one of these characters in terms of like just
It's
wanting
just
to see more
amazing
of
we
their
haven't
story.
gotten this conversation between the two of them 2 decades ago. Like it feels like a
Right.
conversation that we should have had a long time ago. And, I'm just very pleased that how it was handled here. So, I mean, look, if you didn't pick
Yep.
that up because it's not an issue of Amazing Spider Man, which I imagine is true for many of our listeners, go pick it up. I think that's a kind of core chapter in this story, if you were to ask me. And, even beyond its significance to the story, it's just a ton of fun. Like, I had a smile on my face the whole
Yep.
time I was reading that book. I mean, Mark, it
Yep.
was good to just pick up some
100%.
Spidey comics this week and have a great time with them. I mean, between this and, Devil's Reign and all of that stuff, I mean, it's been a lot of fun to read comics the past few weeks. And we got another Zeb Wells issues coming up next. I mean, I think we're on a good roll here with Spider-Man comics.
Absolutely, Dan. All right, so why don't we give this one a grade? I mean,
Yeah, let's
we're
just
just
grade
grading
amazing.
amazing,
Yeah.
right? Black Cat, Mary Jane. All right. I'm gonna go A minus, and let me. It's a high A minus. Like I wanted to go A, but kind of like what you alluded to earlier when you mentioned like the platonic ideal of the comic. Like maybe if this had like a villain fight or something like that, it would be an easy A for me. But like because it's still missing a couple of core elements, I can't go full. Like it's not that A is a perfect score, but it's a near perfect score. But it's a high A minus. It's a is that am I
No, no, I'm
overselling? I
I'm
don't
right there
know.
with you. High A minus from me as well. I think it's that it is so slight, is what like it doesn't
Yeah,
push it all the way up there to me. Like an A plus is like something that like delivers on plot and character in a big way, right? And those type of issues only come around every so often. I think about like Superior Spider-Man number 9, which is like high emotion,
hmm
high plot. This was really, really fun. And I'm glad it doesn't have a lot of plot, but it's not one that I'm like, this is the peak of Spider-Man. Like, in all honestly, all Spider-Man comics, I think, should like meet this threshold because I think there were runs where this was
yeah,
the threshold of a normal Spider-Man comic.
yeah. I think that's a fair point for sure. I think our last season kind of touched upon that
Yeah,
issues that were like
absolutely. So
that.
great. A minuses from both of us, which I think has become standard over the years that you and I agree more often than not. But yeah.
As long as we're not talking TV or movies, Dan,
Oh,
we
and I,
tend
I
to
think if we
agree.
talk in the depth that we talk about TV or about comics, we would probably agree more than not on TV and movies.
Yeah, that's a fair point. You've said that before, and
Yeah,
I
yeah.
do agree with
All right.
that.
Well,
So
great. If you
100%.
find anything that Mark and I do entertaining and valuable, whether you agree or disagree with our takes, it'd be great if you considered supporting us. The best way you can do so is just by telling people about our show. I mean, it's in the wake of No Way Home. Everybody wants more Spider-Man content in their lives, and Mark and I are sitting right here, ready to capitalize on that in whatever way. And I don't mean that like in a money way. I mean like we want to spread the joy of comics to people. Like we love Spider-Man and our show is really based on that. So if you could tell people about our show, that would be great. But, look, we got to keep the lights on too. And we get a lot going on with the show every week. So if you want to help support us continuing what we do, why not consider becoming a member on our Patreon?
Yeah, Dan, we can only bring all of you this content with the support of our Patreon members. And we owe the show's success to every single one of them. We're constantly making exclusive content
Yeah,
for our
all the
members too,
time.
Dan, right?
We have like new artwork from Nick Cagnetti coming in. We are doing reviews like this. And just for $3.99, the price of a new comic, you can sign up for a subscription to our Patreon content and you'll show up in your podcast feed every week when we do it. That way, you don't have to wait to hear our Patreon exclusive review podcasts like this one that we do on Amazing Spider-Man the same week that they, come out, right? You don't have to wait those 3 months for it to show up in our feed. And you can join us on our live streams of it and see the video version while we record it live and chat with other fans in the comments. I mean, what could be more fun than that?
Yeah, Dan, no doubt. Also, if you contribute $10 a month, you gain access to exclusive artwork from Spider-Man artists, which is commissioned exclusively for our members. Plus, every episode, we release a new episode-specific desktop background created for us by artist Nick Cagnetti. Dan, you just referred to that, and that's for all of our
Mark, I
patrons
hear
to
you
enjoy.
have like a bid on a new piece of artwork for our supporters coming down the pike. Do you want to tell people about that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, I don't know how many of you out there are familiar with the work of Mike Fife. He was actually the writer of what was it, the
The
Ultimates
all new
for a
Ultimates.
while. The all new Ultimates, but his claim to fame is his indie comic Copra. He's also done some stuff for DC. I mean, his art is fantastic. I mean, I recommend following Fife on Instagram. He's actually an old friend. He worked with my wife way back in another lifetime. Kind of at one point in my life hooked me up with some really good comics. We could talk about that some other day, the legalities of how I acquired them. But the fact of the matter is, Fife is a great guy, and through his Patreon, he will do commissions for people. And after years and years of me tell him, Mike, hey man, we want your art on our show. How do we make this happen? We're gonna make it happen. So it's gonna take a while. He probably won't get to doing the commission until the end of this calendar year. But be on the lookout, people. We're gonna be doing a FIFA commission. And it's going to tie in great to our next season, which is, of course, going to be focused a lot on the DeFalco Friends run and the symbiote and the birth of Venom and all that. So,
yeah,
be on the lookout,
I'm so excited
everyone.
about this. I love his artwork. It's so quirky and unique, and I know he's going to give us, kind of his own definitive take on the characters we've asked him to do. And, I'm still crossing my fingers, Mark, that we get like a Spider-Man grand design book done by him, but I know he's a busy dude with Copra, and that book recently getting picked up by Image. So, he's just a cool creator to kind of follow. But that's coming down the pike. We'll have other announcements about other artwork coming soon, but that's the one that we're making you get excited about, or we hope you're excited about, rather. But, we do know that this is a hard time for everybody, as it is for us too. So we appreciate anyone who supports the show just by listening and sharing. But, if you do have the means, we put out a lot of awesome content on the Patreon. Just go over there, check it out. Even if you don't sign up, at least familiarize yourself with it, because if you do sign up, these are the things that help us continue to do the show. And lastly, I can't end the show without thanking all the members who already make the show possible.
All right, Dan. But unfortunately, it is that time, which means it's time for all good things to come to an end. So we want to say thank you to you, the listeners and viewers, for tuning in to this episode of the Amazing
this episode
Spider
was edited
Talk.
by Rick Coast with production support from Andy Myers. Our artwork comes handcrafted by artists Ron Friends, Sal Buscema, and Ray Sumser. Our theme songs were produced by Rylan Bojack, Tony Thaxton, and Spider Madge. So, Mark, until you admit that you like big butts and you cannot lie, what's our motto?
Oh, that and your dump truck ass, Dan. That motto, of course, is, with great podcasts, there must also come the Amazing Spider Talk.
Too many who know the angles, uncover and untangle all the questions and the webs left out to tangle. In 1962, last Wednesday's afternoon, they'll binge your ears with reckless self-abandon. The Amazing Spider Talk. The Amazing